On today's episode of Marketing with Moxie, we'll be picking up where we left off to go over the last 3 phases of the consultative selling process as it applies to sales and digital marketing. Teach, qualify, and close. Are you ready to get that close?
Hi there, I'm Amanda Rosen,
And I'm Alex Rosen, and this is Marketing with Moxie,
a podcast about sales and digital marketing for business owners and marketers.
Twice a week, we'll share tips, tactics, and strategies designed to keep you relevant, visible, and profitable.
Let's get to this week's episode.
Hello, and welcome back to the Marketing with Moxie podcast. It's Alex Rosen, joined by my, I would say, better half, Amanda Rosen.
Hello. Just leave it.
Wow. I was not expecting her to say hello like that. But in last week's episode, we covered the first 3 phases of consultative selling: research, ask, and listen. And this time we're going to be covering the final 3 phases.
It's the final countdown.
Da-na-na-na.
Da-da-da-da-da. All right, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, if you want to brush up on those first 3 phases, you can hear them on episode 2, of course. So, Amanda, have you used any consultative selling this week, maybe to clients or in work or with the kids?
Probably with the kids. Anytime I try to get them to do anything, I always am having to ask them what it is that they need and then listen to all their complaints and then research how I can do that better. Of course, I did that all out of order. But I'm definitely consultatively selling our children.
To real life. It's not just work. So, yes, use consultative selling wherever you can. Well, let's get right into the topic today. We left off with actively listening to our customers and keeping our ears open for particular stated needs. And that leads us right to our next phase, which is, after you hear those stated needs, teaching or educating the customer. So in the teach phase, basically, based on the stated needs that you hear from that active listening phase, at this point, you'll want to come into the conversation with the customer to teach or show how your product or service meets those particular needs. Now, these are opportunities to demonstrate particular ways in which your product or service specifically fits the needs. Now, I can't say this enough, but the goal is not about simply informing them about the product or service. Amanda, let's do a mock scenario on this just so I can kind of demonstrate. You're the client. I'm going to be a horrible salesperson in this case. So let's say you're interested in scheduling software for your company, like I don't know, Calendly or Appointlit or something like that. So tell me your needs regarding scheduling.
Okay. Well, let's say we can just use like what I currently do as an example. So usually the first point of contact is booking a discovery call where we meet each other. I meet the potential client and she meets me, and then we kind of see what's the story on both ends and if we'd be a good fit. And then the next thing would be scheduling, if we decide to work together, and after like we've launched everything, a 72-hour check-in to see like how everything's going, and then like a consistent check-in call for the duration of the project, like once a week or something like that.
Well, that's cool. So our scheduling tool is so cheap compared to the competitors, who stink, by the way. You're going to love how quick it is to schedule appointments, let me tell you. We have great integration with Google Calendar and Outlook. And I bet you, do you like metrics and analytics?
Yeah.
Well, we have the best stuff with that. So, pause. This is an example of what not to do. Now, when I first started out in sales many years ago, and I finally got a hold of a contact who I wanted to talk to after several emails or voicemails, I was guilty of this sales sin. You get excited that you're in conversation with someone finally, and you just want them to know everything that's awesome about what you have to offer. And I would be like, so our product here is so awesome, and it can provide improved results and make your life so much easier. And here, let me show you this, 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 and this. But the problem here is the customer didn't divulge any needs related to all those thises. So Amanda, where have you seen these missteps in the digital marketing realm?
Okay, yeah. So in digital marketing, you would see this coming in the form of a mismatch between your targeted audience and your ad creative, where you think that your ad creative is really going to speak to this target or this particular audience that you're interested in, but nothing's working. Like the ad's just not resonating with them. Another misstep that would be specifically to the ad creative would be feature dumping. That happens a lot, where maybe in the copy you're overly focusing on all the features of a particular product or even just the benefits, and you're not talking about the transformation that those features and benefits provide, or you're not leading with the transformation in the very least.
Yeah, so the goal here instead is to address each point that the customer has brought up, or that the customers have, as best as possible, and seek to overcome their challenges. I mentioned last week about writing down their stated needs on a piece of paper and then drawing a dotted line to a particular feature of your product or service that meets those specific needs. That is your hit list, basically. That is what you need to show. So let's go back to our mock scenario here and see how Alex, the leveled up salesman, would handle it. So Amanda, just for benefit here, tell me again, what are your specific scheduling needs that your company has?
I need a tool that's going to help me book a discovery call for someone preemptively, so I haven't even talked with them yet. They need a way to book a discovery call. I need a way for us to mutually schedule a 72-hour post-launch call. And then I need a way to schedule consistent check-in calls that happen during the duration of our working relationship.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned wanting to book discovery calls. To clarify here, you mean calls with your customer to see what their needs are?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So our software does have customizable fields for appointment sign-up pages where you can ask some questions. It'll have these fillable fields or even radial dials where you can make them required when they book. That would certainly help to capture a lot of that information prior to the call. Now, I also heard in there that you wanted to schedule 72-hour post-launch calls, correct?
Yes, this needs to be able for us to find a mutually beneficial time.
Right. So we do have the ability to put in automation at the customer level to schedule those post-launch calls. You can label and qualify such calls and put actions on them to sync to your calendar. Now, I noted finally the other main need was scheduling check-in calls for campaign maintenance. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. Consistent calls that happen during the campaign maintenance.
Okay, so using that same automation in the software, you can put in preset check-ins at defined intervals, and those are going to be labeled accordingly for all your attendees when they get those automated email reminders from the software, and you can set those to 24 hours before. They can choose to keep it on their calendar or cancel the session, whether or not they actually feel like they need it. They, like I'm good to go, or I can't because I have explosive diarrhea.
I did not. You really wrote that in the script. I didn't notice that earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
I should probably work for Calendly or something.
Yeah,
like that,
you
right?
just sold me on. I know you use Calendly in work. And
I do.
That's how
I love
know.
Calendly.
That's how you know so much about it. It is a
Please
good software.
sponsor us, Calendly. Okay. Anyway, but you see what I did there. I'm restating the stated need, right? And that helps to kind of show that I'm paying attention, and also making sure that I'm understanding it exactly correctly, and then educating them on basically just the things that would be relevant and important to them in the product or service. Now, there's room for flexibility, to be sure, right? To direct to some aspects they may not know they even need. But that's not the main focus. That flexibility, though, to maneuver should come more organically from the conversation at hand. So, Amanda, how is teaching or educating customers done right in the digital marketing side?
All right. So on digital marketing, when you're teaching or educating your customers, there's a few ways you can do it. First of all, it's kind of going back to what I said earlier, ensuring that targeting, the audience that you're targeting, really aligns with the messaging that you're putting out there. So tailoring what you're creating in terms of your images or your ad copy to make it not only resonate with your audience, but clearly get across that transformation that your product or your service is going to provide to them. So just making sure you're not feature dumping only, you're really helping them walk through and understand the journey that they're going to experience with you and taking them from point A to point B, and how your product is the vehicle or your service is the vehicle to accomplish that. And then the other huge component of this is really what content marketing is all about. This is why I am so vocal, I guess, about making sure that you don't put all of your eggs in one basket. So you can't only focus on your outbound marketing. You really also need to have that balance with your inbound marketing, your content marketing. Educating consumers is so easy to do with content marketing. I mean, that's its entire job, is to explain what you do, how you do it, why you're the best person or product or service to be doing this. So this can be in the form of infographics that you share on social media. It can be little video clips. It can be mini trainings. It can be free classes. There's all kinds of different ways you can educate your consumers or your customers or your clients about what you do and why you do it and how you do it. The important thing is to just make sure that you have those little bits of education and pieces of information at every point of the way. So in marketing, and I guess probably in sales too, because we're sort of talking about how it is a funnel. There's always that top of funnel, which is sort of what we already talked about, the research, the asking, the listening. For marketing speak, that would be top of funnel. It's awareness, it's consideration, same thing. And you need content in that part of it, because that is going to educate them when they're early on in their journey. And then you also need content for middle of funnel, which is kind of what we're talking about right now, when you're understanding their needs and you're sort of tailoring things a little bit more. So that's how it applies in marketing.
Oh, yeah. I've made a lot of good use of, you mentioned infographics. People really like to see, just quick visual, like
with stats.
And with stats, like yeah. And I found, case studies and white papers.
Oh, yeah. Case studies are great in marketing too. And those are things you can use to like not only build your email list, but then also establish yourself as an authority while you're doing that. And those things do get across the transformation while demonstrating the features and benefits of what you're doing.
That's some efficacy behind all of it. So after having this listening and teaching back and forth with your customers, it's time to get a little bit introspective and analyze the situation. And that leads to the next phase, which is qualifying. And this is where you actually qualify or determine if your solution is best based on the information gathered and the conversation, and namely if the client is a qualified or unqualified lead, as well. So in terms of unqualified leads, here's a hard truth that you must learn. Not every client is worth your time and energy investment, and your product may not always be the best fit for them. Now, I've spent plenty of time with customers who I simply couldn't, in good conscience, steer into a product because they were not ready for it, or it was not a good fit for them and what they wanted to do. Don't push a square block into a round hole. My 1-year-old knows this. Actually, she doesn't quite yet, but she's learning, right, Amanda?
She is. She's learning. Oh, she's so smart. I like what you said, though, about the time. I think that's something really important to point out, is that you can always make more money, but you cannot manufacture time. And this kind of leads into how marketing lends a hand with qualifying leads before they get into your sales process. Marketing, if it's doing its job, can sort of save you time on the sales side. So a few different ways you can determine whether your marketing is bringing in qualified or unqualified leads is, first of all, are you seeing sales? If you're not seeing sales, or if your sales team cannot convert these leads that you're bringing to them, then you're not targeting the right audience, or there's something off with your ad creative, or something is going on elsewhere. Which kind of dovetails to the point that if sales isn't feeding data back to marketing about how these leads are performing, then marketing doesn't know how to optimize and adjust. So this is a really great example of how these two things need to work together, because otherwise the whole thing falls apart. And then other ways are there are usually qualifying benchmarks, which are sometimes called KPIs or key performance indicators, that a marketing team or department or person needs to know about. And these can help qualify in terms of data and include stuff like, what's the cost per lead, or what's the cost per acquisition, or even knowing how many people you have to be in front of before you'll finally get a lead. So the number of impressions that you have to see on your ads or your piece of content before someone's going to fill out that form or book a call. Other data points a marketer needs to know about in order to qualify a lead are the character traits or the demographic pieces of information and qualities around the business's ideal client or customer, because these things really inform the targeting. So that comes down to, what is the business's ideal customer into? Are they a man or a woman? How old are they? Where do they live? What's their position at work? All of these details create a picture of a person, and that helps inform targeting, and it also helps inform the ad creative as well. And of course, those are the main ways a marketer can qualify a lead for the sales team.
Is that like an avatar, basically?
Yes, that's your ideal. Sometimes it's called an ideal client avatar. Sometimes it's just called, your ideal client.
Yeah. And I find that there are, at least from a sales perspective, you come to know different customer types. There's, in my field, there would be like the digitally averse people, or the people that are all on board with, adding in and challenging themselves with new coursewares and digital components. So as you come to reach out and, work with your clientele, you'll come to know certain like designations, certain different like sub avatars, I would say, of what your main avatar is. I mean, because your main avatar, I feel, of course does exist, but, when you're throwing darts at a board, you're going to hit things that are not quite there, but are still going to get you where you need to be. It's just going to look a little bit different.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And here's the other thing is, a business will probably have multiple avatars. So, for your company, for example, you could say that your generalized overarching avatar is a department head at a university. Mm-hmm. But then there will be like specific attributes that go along with that avatar that can help the marketing department know, even down to like, what are the words that need to be on a button for a form that needs to be filled out, whether it's, someone coming from this type of department or this type of university. So that's sort of how these two things can play together.
So in terms of whether a lead is qualified, though, if you Google this topic, you will often find this acronym, BANT, budget, authority, need, and time frame. So this was conceived by the minds at IBM as a way to validate opportunities. Basically, if you meet 3 of those 4 BANT items, or BANT, your opportunity would be more than likely valid. So on budget, obviously that's, what is your prospect's budget? Can they actually afford your solution at any tier?
Yeah, so in marketing, there are a few ways you can help your sales process or your sales team understand the budget side of a lead that you're pulling in through your ad creative. And one of my favorite ways to do this is if you have a form, like a lead form that you're having them fill out, whether it's to book a call or something like that, you can have a line item on there that asks a question, what's your budget to implement this solution that we offer, but obviously tailor that wording however it makes sense for your business. Or you could also say, you can ask people what their income levels are. You have to be careful with that because you ethically should not be discriminating against people based on their income. but in some senses, it would make sense, depending on what your service was. So there are definitely ways that you can help that process along to see where they're at in their budget, and if you have a tier in your service offerings that would make sense for them.
Yeah. So on authority, though, I think this is definitely something that you can find. And that's mainly, does this prospect have the decision-making authority, or are they an influencer or advocate to get your foot in the door, maybe to that decision-making authority? So I'd mentioned this before on the episode before this, but if you can't get to the decider, it can be valuable to get to someone who the decider will listen to. Ideally, it's always good if you can be talking to the main authority, but sometimes they want to hear from one of their own.
Yeah, and again, this goes back to that form thing. I think we've all seen the forms where it says, what's your position in your company? That's one way to kind of unearth who are these people that are filling out my lead form. Are they the right people to get in front of? And then if they are, great. If you're not having a lead form and you're just, purely looking for people to talk with to get your service in front of or your product in front of, you can actually find out a lot of information on LinkedIn, believe it or not. You can go to company pages. When you go to a company's page, you can see the employees that belong to that company that are registered on LinkedIn. And then you can kind of see, like, first of all, how's the organization structured? Like, what are they calling their internal employees? And then you can get a feel for, who is the person in this role who might be a decision maker, that type of thing.
And that takes us to the next part of the BANT acronym, which is need. What's a prospect's business need? Let's do the stated need chant, Amanda. Are you ready?
Yes.
When I say stated, you say need.
You say stated.
Damn it. Let's do it again. No, let's not worry about it. Anyway.
Okay.
So if what you have doesn't meet... Wow, we have no rhythm whatsoever, right?
It's all right.
That's okay.
We do our best.
Yeah. So if what you have doesn't meet the stated need, then it may be best to walk away, honestly. I think that's probably the most important part of the BANT acronym. Even if they did have the budget, authority, and needed something with urgency, if there isn't a real need for what you're selling, why are you even talking to them? I've had instances where I've messed up here and I've sold something that wasn't a heavy need for them. And guess what happened, Amanda?
They did not use it.
They dropped it. Eventually, whether it was, short-term or long-term. So in my industry, we would call this fake digital, but we could call this a fake sale.
So in marketing, this happens too. And it really impacts a metric called your LTV, which is your lifetime value of your customer or your client. Every business has an LTV, whether they know it or not. Your LTV is the amount of time someone is typically your customer and the amount of money they spend while they're your customer. There's a whole formula to figure out what the LTV is. So if you're pushing someone to be your customer who isn't really an ideal fit, they will not contribute to your LTV. They'll mess the whole thing up. And when your LTV gets messed up, it not only messes up your metrics, because sometimes whole ad campaigns can be run on customer lists that are impacted by LTV or optimized around an LTV number, but on a practical level, if your LTV is messed up because you're pushing people to buy who aren't really going to be around for the long haul, it impacts your longevity, which is a huge problem. And I mean, I'm all about framing your marketing with the long game in mind, which means attracting those customers who will be with you for the long haul. And there's a final consideration in terms of marketing. It really impacts your ability to build brand loyalty, which directly impacts your brand equity, which might be a funny concept if you've never thought about it before. But yes, brands have equity. They have, especially if they're a really well-known brand. So if you're not approaching this whole thing with a mindset of building raving fans, which is ultimately what brand equity is all about, or brand loyalty, then why are you even doing this?
Exactly. So you can apply this LTV thing to marriage too, right?
Oh, do you have an LTV? Do I have an LTV?
Yours is very high.
Oh, good. Yours is as well.
Well, that's very sweet of you.
It was very sweet of you, too.
Everybody's tuning in for all this mushy stuff, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, of course.
This is also a romance podcast.
Yes. So now we're going to talk about... No, okay. So we are going to talk about time frame, though. So the last part of that BANT acronym for qualifying a customer. And that is simply, in what time frame will the prospect be implementing a solution? Sometimes time frames can play in your favor. If they need something ASAP and you have your ducks in a row first before the competition and present a solution based on those needs, that can be the ticket. For example, if a company has to switch out a CRM, customer relationship management software, by the end of the fiscal year due to the way the budget is set up, you can bet they'll be on the phone with Salesforce and Zendesk, and honestly, whichever rep has the needs addressed and organized first and best is going to get the close. Even if one may be a better fit than the other, speed and presentation can sway the balance, I feel.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, the same concept is kind of why marketing exists to begin with, particularly outbound marketing. I mean, one of my jobs as a marketer is to get my client service or product in front of their ideal client or customer at the right time when that urgent need is ready to be met, when they're ready to move out of that consideration phase and into the conversion phase. Inbound marketing, however, is a whole other story with how time frame plays into it because it's really about the long game, which we've kind of already talked about. Inbound marketing or content marketing is about seating yourself in the mind of the customer. So you're being helpful, you're providing information, and when their need arises, you're top of mind because of the value you've consistently given over time. And again, this is why I recommend a combination strategy with the two, because you'll always be pulling in customers or leads from both sides. So for example, let's say you're a company selling protein powder. Someone might be searching for what's the best protein powder to add to my morning shake for two very different reasons. One person may have a very urgent need because they're about to train for an athletic event and they really need a protein powder like today. Or someone else may simply be researching, like they're in the awareness or consideration phase and they're just gathering information on their options. But when your marketing is equally balanced, you can reach people in both of these places of your funnel with the inbound and the outbound strategy. And one final point about all of this too is I don't want to cause confusion and say that content marketing is always inbound marketing. Content marketing is just a portion of inbound marketing. And in terms of the long game, if you're nurturing a lead for a long time, obviously you can be posting on your social media channels, providing that knowledge. You can, if you have a podcast, be putting out information there or your blog. But another great way to do this is through email marketing. You can be consistently emailing these people on your email list, keeping that list warm, those leads nurtured so that when the time is right, they remember you and they're ready to go.
You're top of mind, basically,
yeah, exactly.
for them because you've kept the conversation going, and though there isn't an urgency or an immediacy to close, they are thinking of you, when it comes to that point. So let's say a customer's need, time frame, and authority meet the BANT standard, but they are concerned about budget. Cost is almost always a primary concern, no matter what industry you're in. So seldom is someone like, money is no object, let me push up my monocle. Amanda, how would you...
Like Mr. Peanut?
Like Mr. Peanut.
Actually, he's baby nut now.
Baby Nut. I was going to say the Monopoly guy, but he doesn't have a monocle. What? I don't think the Monopoly guys have
a monocle. I almost said he doesn't have a monopoly.
The Mandela effect where everybody assumes that he has a monocle. I don't think he has a monocle.
Okay, we'll confirm that later.
So, Amanda, how would you overcome the budget prospect then in that situation? Remember, they meet need, time frame, and you're talking to the right person, authority, but they're concerned about cost.
Well, it would depend on if they actually had the budget to begin with. Like, why are they concerned about cost? You could, though, reframe it to talk about the value that you're providing and really emphasize investment and how it goes back to that conversation around transformation and the transformation for them that your product or service is providing. And when you reposition like that and you come up with creative ways to address the cost aspect, it kind of reduces that barrier a little bit. But then here's the other thing. You also don't want to beg someone to become your customer. And that's a really important line to walk, which is why I said you have to think about, why is budget an objection for them? Because you don't want to wage psychological warfare on a prospect to score a sale if they're not contributing to your LTV, and they're going to hurt that in the long run. You can also think about, too, pricing psychology, which sort of goes back to that value conversation. So there are groups of people who will hear specific words around pricing, and it will either make them feel happy or it will make them feel nervous.
Triggered.
Yeah, or they're triggered depending on
so
who they are. So here's a really good example. If you're Walmart, the word discount is exactly what your ideal customer wants to hear. They are all about the discount.
Rollback prices.
But if you're Nordstrom, your customer probably doesn't care about discounts. They care about upgrades. It's the same thing. It's a different way to frame the value that you're providing.
Amanda, that was really good. And we'll presume that we are ready for the final phase of the consultative selling process, the almighty close. So this is, yes, angels singing, we are here. The close is the final part of the sequence where the customer chooses to buy because they have determined what you have meets their needs and is worth it. But you also have determined that they are indeed qualified for a combination of reasons that we just mentioned: budget, authority, need, and time. I feel strongly that this should be a two-way street. They have what you want, the power to buy, and you should have what they want and need, the power of the product or service.
I have the power. That was my best He-Man impression.
Was not expecting that, but that was good.
I can't be Prince Adam.
I thought you were more into She-Ra.
I was.
But you liked He-Man too?
Well, yeah, he came first.
Well, they're brother and sister, so.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Probably came at the same time.
I don't know that. Were they twins? Another thing we'll have to confirm later.
We'll get into this in another episode. We'll get into this in
another episode.
Why did I say episode like that?
Episode.
Good Lord. It's a mutually beneficial transaction here. And it should feel like a natural transition. It just makes sense.
So in marketing, this is obviously the conversion. This is the final phase. This is end of funnel. When they pop out of the funnel and they shoot your customer.
This is what happens.
Oh dear. Okay. It's almost 11 p.m. We're tired. We've had a long day, and we're parents. We're squeezing this in at the end of the day.
Okay, keep on going.
All right. So in marketing, this is called the conversion. And this is when the stars have aligned between your targeting, your messaging, your sales process.
When our powers combine.
When our powers combine.
Captain Planet.
We get a conversion.
Captain Planet converts from a bunch of kids into a
hero.
Blue guy with, was he have green hair?
Yeah, I think so. He looked like that toothpaste guy.
He did look, what toothpaste guy?
The crust guy who was sparkly and blue. We've talked about this guy before.
Oh, good marketing.
Yeah, he was like a pivotal moment in my childhood. Blue toothpaste guy with the sparkles.
Nice.
Crust, I think.
Okay.
All right. So anyway, I'm just going to start this whole section over, and then you can decide if you want to chop things around. So yeah, in marketing, this is called conversion. And this is when your powers combine and everything works for your favor and you get the sale. Whether it's through a website without a person, like if you're e-commerce, or using a person if you're a service provider, you get the conversion. And at that point, as a marketer, it's your job to track the metrics associated with the close or with the conversion. Like, did you pull in the volume of leads to make the close profitable for your business? So some of the KPIs you might track for this are your ROI, or return on investment, or your cost per acquisition. Those are the things that matter here. And then we should probably do like a whole separate episode just on KPIs.
On KPIs. Mm-hmm.
On like the different parts of the sales funnel or the marketing funnel. And then the other thing you need to be tracking is a way to tie your conversions back to the audience and the creative that actually worked, so that you can keep doing more of what's working. Otherwise, you're just kind of shooting in the dark.
That's quite an image.
Pew, 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 pew,
I'm shooting in the dark. I know what I'm doing. It's like an old-timey prospector.
Yeah. That's how I envision myself when I market. I'm an old prospector.
Panning for customers.
That's right.
Anyway, the closing phase, I would say, is not without pitfalls. This is where you may run into pushback or smoke screens, where you get those excuses to delay the close or objections which may seem legitimate or illegitimate. So I will caution you just to be prepared for addressing those. Amanda and I, teaser, are going to do a whole episode on ways to overcome sales objections and really dive in like on the cost one. So stay tuned for that. But that wraps up part 2 of the consultative selling process. We hope you learned a lot and can apply aspects of this into your sales and marketing. To recap, we covered researching the customer, how to ask the right open-ended questions, ways to actively listen to the customer, then teaching or educating the customer about your product or service based on the stated needs that you got from listening, qualifying the customer after that conversation, whether they're the right fit for you, them for you, you for them, and finally getting that almighty close.
Yes. We covered it all. What's a sizzle reel?
Sizzle reel? That's like the trailer.
Am I supposed to say sizzle reel?
No, you don't have to say sizzle reel.
Well, it was purple. You shouldn't have made it purple.
Okay.
Yeah, so that wraps up consultative selling and marketing. And next week, we're going to talk about the 5 changes coming to the Facebook and Instagram platforms that you need to know about for your business. Yeah. There's nothing huge. They're actually really fun. I'm excited about them for once. And then the 4 ranking signals that the algorithms use on those platforms. So as you're working on your selling or your marketing, you can work with the algorithm instead of against it.
You got to stay up on this stuff or you'll get left in the dust, though. I mean...
That's right. Zoom. Zoom, zoom, zoom. Pew, pew, I'm shooting.
Like she's shooting in the dark again. All right. See you guys.
Bye.